This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Dawn and Great Rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of the planet. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. I am very privileged to have as a guest today, Dr. Tameka Ellington. She's the CEO and founder of Dr. Tameka Ellington Enterprises, a personal, professional, and spiritual wellness company. She's a speaker, internationally acclaimed and awarded fashion scholar and confidence coach. She's the author of 5 books, including the award-winning book Textures, The History and Art of Black Hair, written for its namesake exhibition, co-curated by Dr. Tameka, featuring artifacts and contemporary artworks musing on black hair and black culture. Her 5th book, Black Hair in a White World, has been released. She is also the host of the Black Beauty Activist podcast, where she has critical conversations with her guests to disrupt westernized beauty standards and raise the consciousness and confidence of Black women. She is also a scholar. She obtained her Bachelor of Arts in Fashion from Kent State University, a Master of Arts in Apparel and Textile Design from Michigan State University, and a PhD in Curriculum and Instruction from Kent State University. With all of that said, welcome to Open Door, Dr. Tameka Ellington. How are you today?
Good. It's good to be with you again. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and I will mention that this is actually your second appearance on Open Door.
Yes.
We had you on a couple of years ago, and so much has happened. As a matter of fact, I think that when we had our last conversation on the air, you were in the process of making a transition from your position at Kent State University into being out there in the world of entrepreneurship and public speaking. And you had so many things going on back then, and you're still doing so many things. So why don't we start with your latest book?
Okay, Black Hair in a White World. This book is, I would say, 3 years in the making. I started this book before COVID, and I gathered together 6 other scholars who also do research about Black hair. And I wanted to do an anthology. And the reason why an anthology was really important to me was because I wanted whoever the reader was going to be, I wanted them to see that the Black hair phenomenon is not an anomaly, that the Black hair phenomenon is very, it's spread out throughout the United States and the world, really, and that it's not just a problem that Tameka has had. It's a problem that many Black women, Black men have had across the nation. And so this book talks a little bit about some history. We give a little bit of cultural history about Black hair. We talk about advertisements. What did advertisements say years and years ago about Black hair? Then we use the critical race theory framework to talk a lot about what's happening in like pop culture. What do children's books and commercials geared towards children, cartoons geared towards children, what do they say about Black hair? And then we go into looking at the movement. So we look historically back at the Black is Beautiful movement, along with the Black Power movement up until the early 2000s when the natural hair movement started. So the book is a beautiful compilation of lots of different stories about people's experiences with living with and being in a black hair in a white world. With this particular with this book, they talk about, the scholars talk a lot about what Black people have had to deal with being Black with Black hair. When I mean by Black hair, I mean natural Black hair. Being Black with Black hair and having to be in a society that we all know is dominated still, unfortunately, by non-Blacks. So that's what this book is all about.
Okay. And you mentioned that there was a personal angle. Can you talk about what your personal relationship with hair is or was that precipitated your idea to create this book?
Yeah. So I am a fashion scholar, as you mentioned. And so all of the work that I had done as a fashion scholar was mostly about Black beauty and hair. I started doing research about Black hair when I was a master's student at Michigan State. So back in 2002 is when I did my very first research study about Black hair. And I've always been fascinated about it because as a Black woman who has kinky hair, some of the experiences that I've had throughout the years, I just wanted to have a better understanding of why society has such a disdain with Black hair and why we as Black people have such a disdain with Black hair. And so that's what my research has been about. I really find it interesting that people who wear their hair natural have to have a certain level of self-esteem in order to do so because of the fact that natural hair is still not 100% accepted in our society. So, you know.
And it's really interesting, too, when you talk about natural hair and you realize how many different DNA types or phenotypes or whatever the term is, because I'm not a scientist, so maybe I can't give you the correct term. But if you just look at skin color amongst our race and you realize that there are 26 different shades of us, then when you look at our hair, you know, not everybody has the same texture in terms of their hair. So, you know, I'm curious about, you know, even the idea of Black hair and why some folks will just maybe default to just hair and leave it at that. So what are your thoughts about the term Black hair?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are lots of different textures of Black hair, and mostly because of the fact that when we talk about African Americans in particular, us as Black people, our skin color, our hair texture began to be modified after enslavement and after our women were often taken advantage of by their slave owners, slave masters, overseers. They were taken advantage of, and being in that particular space oftentimes led to pregnancies. And in that way, a lot of people were brought up and out of that situation who had lighter skin tone. They had straighter hair texture because of their biracial heritage, and it oftentimes led to a way of a separation between Black people. And so when I talk about Black hair, I'm talking about all the textures. I'm talking about people that are, you know, biracial versus people that are our African brothers and sisters, and their experience. It doesn't matter whether or not someone has curly, wavy, kinky hair. If they're a Black person, in some way, shape, or form, they've been discriminated against. They felt as though they've had no choice but to straighten their hair because this is what society tells us beauty is supposed to look like. So all textures of Black hair, people have had, they have different stories. A person that has a looser curl, like a biracial person, is going to have a very different story than, say, a person who has very, very kinky, coily hair. The story is going to be different, but yet and still, one of the things that's the same is some of the messages that they get from society, that only hair that's considered beautiful is straight hair. That's the closest that you can get to white people's hair. That's what's supposed to be beautiful. And so we've all, as Black people, no matter the texture of our hair, has had to deal with coming to grips with that situation.
I would venture to say, and again, I'm not a scientist, biologist, or anything like that, but I would venture to say that some of our hair has absolutely nothing to do with miscegenation or race mixing. I think some of it is just genetically, that's what we are. It's just like the idea that we all have Black hair and brown eyes. And then you can go to other parts of the world and you will find, you know, people who probably are of African descent due to the migrations that occurred thousands and thousands of years ago, who have blonde hair and they have blue eyes and they Black as me or you or even darker skin. So, but, you know, I think this whole this whole idea of negative perception of us based on our hair is just part of an overall system of racism that has been used to discriminate against us, and then sadly, we discriminate against each other.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That concept of good hair and bad hair, for instance, it's flawed, because when you think about it, what you call bad hair was something that provided a certain level of protection for that person who had that hair, where they were, as they adapted to the conditions of the environment that they were in. So it's necessary. And not only that, it's functional.
Yes.
It serves a purpose. So much to learn about that. And what a deep rabbit hole we could go into about that. I'm also looking back, because you talked about the natural hair movement. And I just happened to be a child of the 70s, so to speak. So back in the 70s, it was kind of a novel thing for someone to be wearing an afro. When you look at the 50s, we weren't wearing fros like we were in the 70s. And then, you went through having the conch, trying to look like Elvis Presley or somebody.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, because now we're in a place where you see a lot more natural hair. And I'm thinking in terms of young people. I see young men that with hair so long, I'm like, wow, how did they do that? And then you have folks that are locking their hair, and there's so many different ways that people express their individuality through their hair. It's really kind of heartening, but at the same time, you have things like the Crown Act that, which basically is a way of saying you can't discriminate against me because I choose to wear my hair a certain way. Did you ever encounter any issues as a professional woman in the workplace where you had to maybe compromise or maybe make a different choice for your hair just based on the corporate environment?
Well, I was lucky. Once I graduated from college and got into the fashion industry, I was quite lucky because, being in an artistic industry, a lot of times people are able to just express themselves a little bit more freely than, say, if I were a lawyer or a doctor or, someone in accounting or something like that. If, my background being in fashion, I think allowed me the freedom to express myself a little bit more. But the one time that I had faced discrimination regarding my hair was when I was actually a college student. So my freshman year, after I finished my freshman year, that summer, I decided that I wanted to work at Cedar Point. And I went to Cedar Point. And if you know anything about Cedar Point, the people that work there often will stay on campus there. So I was living at the Cedar Point campus. I was working there. And during my orientation, the managers were talking to us about what the dress code was, what we could wear, what we couldn't wear, what our, how many ear piercings we could have, what our tattoos had to look like. Because back then you couldn't wear a whole lot of piercings. You couldn't wear a lot of tattoos. You couldn't have really wild color hair. But then they also talked about the fact that we couldn't wear afros, that we couldn't wear braids. We couldn't wear locks. These were all hairstyles that were Black hairstyles. And at the time, I was in the process of transitioning from wearing permed hair to wearing my natural hair. And I was actually wearing a little afro at the time. And so just to say, I didn't last very long at that job. I think I was probably there for maybe a month, and then I went back home. But yeah, that was my first experience with hair discrimination. And that experience is what got me interested in wanting to know more.
Okay. Well, I had an interesting experience myself. One of my first jobs, I was working at McDonald's, and I had a big fro. And the manager told me that I had to wear a hairnet. And I'm like, nope, I'm gone. We're going to talk more about Black Hair in a White World, her fifth book, and some of the other books that she's written. And we'll also give you some information about other things that she's doing right now when we return. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is author and motivational speaker and entrepreneur and a couple of other slashes that we won't mention right now. Dr. Tameka Ellington will be right back.
Hey guys, this is D. Lachey. I'm all about togetherness. Together we make the world go round. You're listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson, and I'm having a great conversation with Dr. Tameka Ellington, someone who I have had the pleasure of experiencing the beauty of Ghana with. And I remember when we were over there, it was like we were there and Dr. Tameka had her own agenda. She was meeting with folks who were all into textiles and everything. She had to hook up. And then when we came back, she did me the pleasure and the privilege of taking a photograph of her for one of her books, and I'll let her tell you about that book. But I'm just pleased to have this conversation with you, Dr. Ellington, and let you know that I really appreciate your trajectory. I appreciate the hard work that you're putting into being successful, particularly in light of the fact that you left that cushy job at Kent State University and decided to embark upon your own freedom train, because as someone who left the world of employment, I just know that it was worth it for me, and I'm sure that it has been worth it for you. Before we get too far into the weeds, just talk to us about how folks who might be interested in Black Hair in a White World can obtain your book.
Okay, so the book is available on Barnes & Nobles. It's available on Amazon. But I would recommend that anyone listening who wants to support Black bookstores, that they get the book off of a website called bookshop.org. Bookshop.org, if you purchase your book there, it'll donate the monies to the bookstore that is in your local area. So where I'm at in Akron, we have one Black-owned bookstore. It's called Elizabeth's Bookstore. And so anybody that buys Black Hair in a White World in Akron, off of bookshop.org, some of the monies will go towards Elizabeth's Bookstore. So if you want to purchase the book, I would recommend that you get it off of bookshop.org. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll make sure that I put that into the description of this podcast, because it'll go up on my YouTube channel, and I'll share it on Facebook for you. When I noticed your press about your book, I just noticed that you were going to a lot of different places, and I think New York was one of the places that you went. Can you talk about, what it's been like for you to be an author and how you have gone about making the folks out there who might have an interest in your subject matter aware of what you're doing?
Yeah, well, one thing I have noticed and have realized is that no matter if you are a self-published author or if you're an author that has been published by a publishing company, marketing is your sole responsibility. So I've had both instances where I've self-published books, but then I've also had situations where I've published with a publishing company. So Black Hair in a White World is published by Kent State University Press. And what I found is that if I want people to know about this book, I have to be the one to talk about this book. So I'm actually on tour right now with this book. This is the first book that I'm touring with. And so I have gone on. When I launched the book, we launched in Washington, D.C., and the significance of launching there was to bring awareness to the Crown Act. You had just mentioned the Crown Act just a few minutes ago, but that's why I launched in D.C. and then from there went to New York for International I Love Braids Day. I'll have an event that I'm going to be doing here in Akron at Elizabeth's Bookstore coming up real soon in November. And then I'll be touring next will be Chicago. I'll be going to next, and then Ohio State has asked me to come and speak about the book. So the way that I've gone about doing that is just reaching out, sending a lot of emails to universities, because that's my main target, is to be able to go to as many universities as possible, or organizations that are Black focused organizations. So I've just been sending out a whole lot of emails, posting as much as I can on social media. And, people have been looking and watching. And if they're interested, they've been picking it up. So if you would love to have someone, myself, come and speak about Black culture, beauty, and its impact on our society, please hit me up. Yeah, I would love to come and speak.
Okay. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about your hair, since hair is kind of the central theme of our conversation. And I've noticed that your hair has gone through a few different changes since I saw you back in 2019. What are your thoughts about the current state of Tameka's hair?
Well, it's about to go through another phase. I had worn, I've been natural now since 98. So I haven't had any kind of chemical straightener in my hair since 98. I've gone through 2 different phases of locks. My first phase of locks, I wore locks for about 13 years. And then my second phase of locks, I think I wore them for probably about 5 years. Well, I'm about to go back to my locks. This particular time, I'm going to do the micro locks, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to have those for quite a while. I need a low maintenance hairstyle, and that's another reason why too. Like with me, cutting my hair really short, I can just wash it and just go. It's low maintenance. I go to bed beautiful and wake up beautiful, and that's what I'm looking for. That's what my locks have done for me. They allow me to go to bed with my hair together. I wake up and it's together. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. Micro lock is going to be the next thing.
Okay. Now your book Textures was about history and the art of Black hair, and it was written and curated by you. How does that book differ from your latest book?
So Textures, as you had mentioned, is it's really a museum catalog book that was created in partnership with the exhibition that I curated, Textures, the History and Art of Black Hair, which showcased at the Kent State University Museum. And so that particular book is one of those beautiful coffee table books that you would love to have in your home to flip through, see the beautiful artwork. There's a few essays in that book, but Black Hair in a White World is like, if you want to get to the nitty gritty of learning about Black culture and hair, you want to pick this particular book up. Textures is the beautified version of Black hair. Black Hair in a White World is the nitty gritty version.
Mm-hmm. I'm recalling a few months back, I was at Kent State University, and one of our colleagues, LaDosha Wright, was actually presenting. And I think maybe you had something to do with that event, or perhaps not. But I just wonder, in light of the fact that she's such an advocate for Black hair, and that, she's someone who will go to Columbus and talk to the legislators about the Crown Act and so forth and so on. Have you had any connections with her, and what the spirit of that collaboration might be?
Yeah, she was a part of Textures. We partnered with her because we had a part of the exhibition that was called the Digital Green Book. And so if you are familiar with the Historic Green Book was a book that African American people used to know where to go, where not to go. It was a book that was put together for African American travelers. So if they were going to be going to a different city, they would know where to eat, where to stay. They would know where to go get their hair done, where to get their hair cut. And so we did a digital version of the Green Book, paying homage to our historical Green Book. And we used the stories of local barbers here in Akron and Cleveland, and local stylists, cosmetologists in Akron and Cleveland. And LaDosha was one of those people that we connected with, and her story was a part of our digital Green Book. And so what we did with those stories, I'm sure you would love this, Vince. So what we ended up doing with the stories of the barbers and stylists, we took their stories, we transcribed their stories, and then we used the words from their stories and put them on this iPad where people could do blackout poetry. For those of you that don't know blackout poetry is where you take a series of texts and you can pick out the words that you want by blacking out other words. Or since we had it digital, people can just tap on the words that they wanted. So people were able to build poetry while they were standing right at the textures exhibition based off of the interviews from some of the local barbers and stylists that we use in the area. So that was really an amazing, opportunity for us to connect with the community. It was really important for us to not only just have a show, but we really wanted to connect with the community. And what was important about that was we wanted everybody to come to Textures. Most of the time when you think of museums, oftentimes our people, Black people, are not really, they don't feel welcome in museums, especially if it's inner city, low income background area. They don't feel welcome coming to museums. They feel out of touch, or they feel like they don't have access. And so we wanted everybody to feel as though they had access and that the museum was a space where they could come to. And so connecting with the community was huge for us. And that was one of the ways that we did that.
Yeah. Well, I was able to witness that exhibition and it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's sad that so many of us did not get the benefit of being able to witness that. So I commend you for the work that you did there. And I commend the university for even facilitating that, just knowing what the climate is there and basically the state of education and particularly higher education in Ohio right now. The things that they're pushing for on the governor's level, with recommended changes in the State Board of Education, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that we won't go into today. But in terms of that exhibition, it was amazing. So again, kudos to you, for creating that. I want to talk to you about some of the other things that you were involved in, particularly fashion, since that's something that's important to you. And the whole idea of textures, I'm just flashing back, and I think I have a photograph of my phone, on my phone, where we were standing in Nana's Palace in Attain.
Yeah.
And there was a sister that you connected with that brought these fabric samples, and they were just absolutely beautiful. I think I ended up buying something from her. I think she may have done a shirt for me. But in addition to your connection with hair, you also have a connection with fashion. Let's talk about that. What was it that drew you to fashion and textiles in particular?
Well, ever since I was a young girl, I always knew I wanted to do something creative. So when I was very young, my first job that I wanted was to be an artist and draw for Marvel Comics. And so I used to spend my days drawing cartoons, drawing comic book characters and all that. But I've always loved drawing. Ever since I was old enough to hold a pencil, I could draw. And when I got to about the 7th or 8th grade, and we had a course called Home Economics, which unfortunately has been taken out of our school's curriculums. But Home Economics introduced me to the world of sewing. And when I had an opportunity to sew for the first time, I said, I don't know what it was. It was an instant connection, and I knew I loved it, and that's what I wanted to do. So ever since I was in 8th grade, I knew that I wanted to do something with fashion.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm just curious now about some of the choices that you have made in fashion and how, you move those choices into teaching fashion, because I'm imagining that at some point you were a professor and you were teaching classes that had something to do with fashion. So we're going to talk about that in just a few moments, about to break away. But I just want to mention one more time, she has a new book. It's called Black Hair in a White World, and you can go to bookshop.org. Go to bookshop.org, and there will be a benefit to this bookstore and the community if you do so, as opposed to going to Amazon. You can go to Amazon, you can go to, Barnes & Noble and get the book. But if you can, go to bookshop.org and get this great book. We'll be back with more Dr. Tameka Ellington right here on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Belcar Community Radio. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. We'll be right back.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, TRIO can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. TRIC is where futures begin.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. I'm having a conversation with author Dr. Tameka Ellington, who has written her fifth book. It's called Black Hair in a White World. And again, you can go to bookshop.org to obtain this book. So you learned about the magic of sewing, and you had a fascination with textiles and whatnot. I'm one of those people that, for whatever reason, I always like to obtain natural fabric. So if I buy pants, I want them to be cotton, I want them to be wool. I don't want polyester pants. I don't want polyester shirts. And one of the reasons that I make those choices is because some of the synthetic fabrics have been said to be carcinogenic. They're not natural, and they're on your largest organ is your skin.
Yeah.
So if you're wearing clothes all the time, there's no doubt that somehow you may be affected. But some of those synthetic fabrics are able to create interesting and nice textures when it comes to clothes. What are your thoughts about what fabrics are made of and how textiles is, part of that whole scenario?
Well, I hate to bust your bubble in regards to the natural fabrics, because oftentimes, even if we use cottons or wools or even silk, depending on what the end use of that fabric is going to be, there's oftentimes going to also be some kind of finish put on the garment. And so the finishes are made up of chemicals, and they might have, like an example might be, if you buy a pair of khaki pants, I'm sure you've seen pants that have said wrinkle resistant or stain resistant. Those are all chemicals that they put on those natural fibers to keep them wrinkle resistant or stain resistant. So even if you do buy a cotton garment, it's still there's a good chance that it's probably going to be coated with some kind of chemical. But with fashion, I've always loved it. There's so many things about fashion that I love, and it's like a love-hate relationship. And the reason why it's love-hate is because I've always loved to dress up. I've always, even in high school, I used to make my clothes. I make a lot of special occasion things for myself. When my boys, got baptized, I made their baptismal outfits, and I made my wedding gown when I got married. So I love fashion. But some things that I don't love about it is the fact that fashion, just like any other industry, is still a very racist, discriminatory industry. Another thing I don't like about it is that there's a lot of waste in the fashion industry. So sustainability has been one of the topics that's really big right now. But it's a love-hate relationship. I still love fashion. I still love to dress, for sure, absolutely. But it's been something that. And you know what? Fashion has really been something that led me to the next phase in my life. So I've been shown by the universe, by the creator, that my main goal being here on this planet is to educate. And it just so happened that I was a fashion educator. I could have been educating people about anything, but me finding my way to education led me now to then what I'm doing right now, public speaking and training and things like that. So I'm an educator through and through. And so fashion really led me to education.
Since you mentioned it, I'm just curious about what a typical career path might be for someone who gets involved in a fashion curriculum. Where do they go with a degree in fashion?
Well, a lot of people probably don't know this, but there's a lot of money to be made in the fashion industry. We all wear clothes. Fashion trends change often. And so people are always needing new things, new shoes, accessories, new purses. All of those things are all a part of the fashion industry. Socks and underwear and swimwear, all of those things are a part of the fashion industry. And so there's always jobs available. And typically, when students leave their respective university, whether it's, Kent State University or Pratt or FIT or any other university that focuses on fashion, they have a lot of options. The students do. They can work in New York City, where there's a huge garment district, lots of jobs in fashion. They can go to Columbus, Ohio, which is one of the largest fashion hubs in the nation also, because of companies such as Abercrombie and Fitch and Limited and Victoria's Secret. They can work in, if they're good with numbers, they can be an analyst and planner and a buyer and be the people that sets the numbers for how much a company can purchase, what they should purchase based on sales from previous seasons. Or they can be a creative. If they want to design the garments, they can definitely do that. So there's lots of options. And one of the things that I found was a challenge as an educator was that parents a lot of times didn't know that there was a lot of options for their students. And so sometimes parents would try to sway their children away from wanting to study fashion because they just didn't understand that, when your son or daughter graduates, they're going to be able to get a job making at least $45,000 a year, at least. And nowadays, some of our students, when they graduate, they make about $60,000 a year. So that's a lot of money for a entry level job. Those kids coming out right out of college. So there's money to be made.
Okay. What about creating a fashion line? Is that something that's feasible for folks that are coming through those curricula?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of our students do fashion lines. Actually, one of my favorite students, her name is Tiara Smallwood. Tiara Smallwood, I had her many years ago. I think she graduated probably about 10 years ago she graduated. But now she has a collection of handbags called Max and Men. And so they're leather luxury good bags that she designs, produces. And now I think she has a contract with Saks or Bloomingdale's or one of the big department stores. And so her handbags, might have a student whose handbags are, in a big department store. So if that is your goal, to become a fashion designer who owns your own company, you are more, you can definitely do that and become an entrepreneur in fashion. But if being an entrepreneur is not your thing, you can go and work for large companies like Kohl's. You can go and work for companies like JCPenney. You can go and work for companies like Abercrombie and Fitch is one of the companies that I used to work for, and I love it. But you can definitely, if you wanna be an entrepreneur out in the industry and striking up your own collection, you can definitely do that. In the fashion, if you study fashion design or study fashion merchandising, it'll give you the knowledge that you need to be able to do that.
So what did you do at Abercrombie and Fitch?
Oh, yeah. So actually, my first design job was with a company that is no longer in existence. It used to be called Limited 2. Limited 2 was like a baby version of the Limited. And I used to design girls' sweaters and cut and sewn tops. Cut and sewn means T-shirts. And I used to design sweaters and cut and sewn tops. And then when I went over to Abercrombie, I started off in the men's department, and I used to design men's woven tops, men's woven bottoms, men's athletic apparel, men's outerwear. And then I eventually moved over to women's and started doing women's woven bottoms, women's dresses. And that's what I did. And so typically when you work for a large company, they split up the workload based on the categories. So you're not going to be, working for a big company and doing, tops and bottoms and things like that. They're going to have, like, depending on the volume of the company, they're going to have a whole separate department specifically just for knitwear. They're going to have a whole separate department specifically just for intimate apparel. They're going to have a whole separate, area specifically just for outerwear and blazers. So it just depends on the category that you want to, work in. And so luckily I've had an opportunity to touch almost all those categories.
Mm. So describe the process. Does it start with your idea that you draw or create a visual of, and then they take that information or they take that image and then they ship it to someone or send it to someone who can actually facilitate manufacturing? How does that work?
Okay, so typically the industry is going to be set up, especially if you work for a large company, it's going to be set up in 3 different main departments. So you'll have your conceptual design department, you'll have your technical design department, and then you'll have your merchandising department or buying department or sales department, some people might call it. So those 3 departments will come together. The sales team will figure out what items sold last season, what's going to be good to sell this time. So they provide the direction. So whenever there's a new season coming up, the sales team provides the direction. They tell the designers what's going to be happening in regards to analytics and things like that. So they set the tone. The designers then begin to get inspiration based on that. So they may go to magazines and look at really high-end magazines. They may go shopping. A lot of times they would go shopping in Paris and other places to see what's happening on the streets and get inspiration that way. And then when they actually decide what they want to design, they'll put it on paper and then they hand it off to people who were in my team. So I was a technical designer. So the technical designer then takes that sketch and makes the sketch come to life. So we're almost like the engineers of the fashion industry. So we take the sketch, we figure out how to make sure that it's going to fit properly. We make sure that it's going to be sewn properly, that all of the trims that need to be in that garment are going to be the proper trims. We get as detailed as talking about how many stitches per inch do we need to put in the garment based on what part of the garment it's in. So for instance, buttonholes is typically about 22 stitches per inch, whereas a regular seam is about 10 to 12 stitches per inch. So we get into really deep details. And the reason why we do that is because then once all of the details are specified by the tech design team, then that information goes to our overseas partners, and the overseas partners gets all of that information, and then they mass produce whatever that product is. So that's typically how it goes. And then it just starts all over again.
Well, I have a complaint with some of the because the way they do men's pants, and this has been a complaint for maybe 10 years or so, but they just don't put enough seat in them. So you bend over and your shirt pops out, and some folks your crack is showing. I mean, I remember a few years back when it was fashionable for women to wear jeans that were low cut, and it was like, I'm seeing a little bit more than I want to see right now. Right. But I was just wondering if there was some type of conspiracy to take the seat out of pants so men would be compromised somehow.
That's funny. That is funny. Well, you would have to ask a lot of those gentlemen in the fashion industry. The fashion industry is still very male dominated. It's pretty much owned by men, owned by white men in particular. Mm-hmm. And so you would have to ask those guys because we just do what they tell us to do.
Okay. Well, yeah. All right. So I'm not going to blame you for that because I know you can't take responsibility for it. But that's been a pet peeve of mine for a while. It's like, well, back in the day, you wore a belt around your waist and the belt would hold your pants up and you didn't have what you have going on right now. And, and then on top of that, you got fellas out there that wear the waist of their pants around the bottom of their behind, which doesn't make sense to me at all. I mean,
no, it doesn't.
It doesn't. But, trends are trends. That's a trend that I wish would see a funeral, just like the N-word needs to see a funeral. But interesting. So we've covered quite a bit of ground in our first 3 segments. I want to shift gears when we come back and talk about you, the public speaker. I've been able to see you in action, and I just have such a great appreciation for your passion, your energy, and the fact that, when you speak, folks listen and they learn. And that's what being an educator is all about. I am having a great conversation with Dr. Tameka Ellington right here on 95.9 FM WOVU. We'll talk some more when we get back. This is Burton Belcar Community Radio.
We remember when we first heard you were on your way, having no idea of exactly what you'd be like or how we'd play a role in your growth and development. But look at you now, 5 years old, making an impact in the community, and still, this is only the beginning. The best is yet to come. On behalf of the team at Another Look at Life with Stephanie, happy birthday, WOVU, the best station in the land.
Hi, this is Tammy Payton, the CEO and founder of Pillars to Success Incorporated. You are listening to 95.9 FM WOVU, Our Voices United, Burton Belcar Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with Dr. Tameka Ellington. Some folks call her Dr. T. I'm privileged to know her as Tameka, but I'll drop that doctor in there when I have to. So, Tameka, you left Kent State University. You got involved in curating exhibitions and writing books and so forth and so on. But another hat that you are wearing is that of motivational speaker. And having had a conversation with you before, I remember you telling me that you were the first in your family to graduate from college, someone who really took education seriously. So you've taken it to another level, and part of who you are is motivating others to achieve success to the degree that you have, and perhaps to an even greater degree. So how was Tameka Ellington public speaker born?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, I'm going to get a little spiritual here on you because I'm a very spiritual person. And being a public, or what I would consider, what the industry considers a professional speaker, didn't come by something that I foresaw for myself. In my mind, I was going to be a fashion designer for the rest of my life. That's what I was going to do. But when I started teaching, my mind was my goal was to just be the best educator that I could be. Well, within doing that, I started realizing that not only was I educating, but I was also empowering my students. They will always leave me these beautiful notes and these beautiful cards telling me how I helped them to see that they could do anything they wanted to do. One of my students said that I helped her increase her level of self-esteem. I would give talks, like people would invite me to speak. One of the very first speaking engagements that I had was actually spoke for TRIO programs. They have an Upward Bound program, and I spoke for their high school graduation students. And what was beautiful about that is I gave the speech, and after the speech, I had someone tell me, you should package that and put that on the road. And I didn't know what that person was talking about. I'd never, ever considered being a speaker. Didn't even know that that was a viable career. And I just kept getting, asked to come and speak at this event, and people kept asking me to speak at other events. And it just kind of organically happened. I started talking to different organizations, and people would want to have me come in. I would speak for the NAACP and other organizations, and I started realizing that this is powerful. Like, if I can take someone's thought process and help them change it to make themselves, get on a better trajectory in their life, that's pretty powerful. And so I remember I was talking to my students one day in class. This was like towards the latter part of me teaching. And I told them, I said, I'm thinking about becoming a professional speaker. And my students, they were like, well, you know what? You will be really good at that, Dr. Ellington. And I said, well, if I go and become a speaker, then I wouldn't be able to be in class with you all. I said, I would miss you guys terribly. And, I don't know if I could do that. Well, one of my students actually stood up and said to me, well, Dr. Ellington, if you become a professional speaker, you'll have a global classroom. And when she told me that, it was almost like it gave me permission to leave. It gave me permission to know that I was still going to be an educator in the process of speaking. And so it found me, and actually God started speaking to me about it. I would see visions. I kept getting these nudges. After I had gotten through the tenure and promotion process, I started getting these visions where God was trying to tell me that it was time for me to leave the university. And I remember I said to myself, no, I'm not going to leave. I would like to at least, get a chance to be an administrator, to be a dean or something before I leave. And I'm telling you, Vince, maybe about a month later, I get a call from the dean's office. And my dean said, can I take you to coffee? And I was like, sure. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do? Am I in trouble? And so he takes me to coffee and he says, how would you feel about being my assistant dean? And of course I said, absolutely. But that was God's way of telling me, okay, you have 2 years. I gave you what you wanted. Now you're going to have to give me what I want. And so after those 2 years of serving as assistant dean, we came into COVID. And when we came into COVID, God was speaking to me and was telling me, it's now or never. You better leave right now, or either I'm going to find a way to get you out of here. And so I had to leave. And in doing so, and leaving the university, unfortunately, I also had to leave my marriage because my ex-husband wasn't supporting it. And so I had to really transition my entire life based on what I knew God wanted me to do. So I would have never decided to be a speaker. This was not the life that I wanted. I wanted to be a fashion designer for the rest of my life, but God saw something different. And so now I'm just surrendering, and I'm just doing whatever it is He asked me to do.
That's really amazing that you had the courage to step out, because it's quite a bit in terms of a leap of faith when you have that steady paycheck coming every Friday, every other Friday or whatever. Yeah. And then it's like, well, that you cut that off, and that means that you got to hustle. And, and obviously you have been doing that, but you are also connected with your purpose in life, and perhaps somewhere in that purpose is a continuation of you being able to design. You have a talent. You can draw. You can create things visually, which is really a great talent to have, versus someone like me who just pushes a button on a camera and does the same thing. But when you can sit down and put that pen or that brush to, a piece of paper and create something of beauty, it's more than a notion to be able to do that. But again, it takes a lot of courage to step out like that. But, the reward is that you get to touch the lives of so many people. So it was quite insightful for that student to tell you about that, that global classroom. And then the other thing is just the nature of education itself.
Yeah.
The other day I saw a video with Bobby Hemmett. I don't know if you know who Bobby Hemmett is, but he's his brother that's into metaphysics, and, he's way out there. I don't think he's still alive. But anyway, he was having a conversation with someone on the street, and they asked him about whether or not he should continue his education or pursue an education. And he said, well, first of all, it's not education, it's training. So there's a difference between education and training, because education is something that happens throughout your life. You don't just get a degree and stop learning.
Right.
So when you go to college, you just basically there to get some training.
Right.
But being a public speaker, I'm just mindful of Les Brown.
Yeah.
And I know someone who was connected with him and is a part of a training platform that he has had for public speakers. And some public speakers, they do quite well. I mean, they don't do anything less than $20,000 a speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
yeah. And that's what I'm climbing up towards. That's what I'm working towards. I mean, it takes a little time to get to that level, but and really what it takes too is just one amazing opportunity. So I keep looking every day for that one amazing opportunity that's going to take me to the next level where I can begin to charge $20,000. I've even envisioned myself being able to charge $50,000 for a talk. Mm-hmm. So I have, I have the faith. I know that God had me to do this for a reason. One of the things that's always been critical for me is to break generational curses of poverty. And so me getting an education was the start of that. And so God is probably now leading me, into a space where that can very well be possible.
I just watched that movie, The Burial. It stars Jamie Foxx with Tommy Lee Jones. And Jamie Foxx depicts Willie Gary. Willie Gary is this flamboyant lawyer from Florida who was a personal injury lawyer. And this white guy who had a string of funeral homes and had run across some hard times had a young brother lawyer approach him and say to him, maybe you might want to consider hiring this guy. So I'm just telling the story. I'm going to tell it, not ruin the film. But at any rate, they come and they visit Willie Gary. And Willie Gary, he's a personal injury lawyer. He's not a contract law lawyer. So he's pushing against this whole idea of doing this. But then that young man tells him that, if you're successful in this case, this will elevate you to a national level. So he named off all these prominent lawyers, and the last one that he landed upon was Johnny Cochran. And when he did that, Willie Gary lit up. And then he won the case. Spoiler alert, I just told you. and it's on Amazon if you want to see it. It's The Burial, but it's a great film.
Okay. Nice.
So I want to suggest that. So what do you have coming up next?
Coming up next. So I have 2 events coming up that I would love to invite people to. I have been working with guest curating at the Akron Art Museum. So I have an exhibition that I curated for them that'll be opening on November the 9th. And I would love to invite everyone to see that exhibition. We'll have a reception. The reception will be from about 6 until 9 p.m. And I'll be there. There'll be one of the artists that's featured in the show will also be there. And then I also have an exhibition that I'm working on right now with the Maslin Museum. I'm curating a show for them, and that show will open in March. And then also too, if someone wants to get a signed copy of my book, I'll be doing an event with Elizabeth's Bookstore here in Akron, and that'll be on Wednesday, November 15th. Wednesday, November 15th at 7 p.m. at Elizabeth's Bookstore here in Akron. So you can get a signed copy of the book. And then there's something else that I wanted to share. I can't remember now, but those are the things that I have coming up. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
you know what? Yeah. Another thing that I have coming up. I just finished a program that I'm going to be pitching to high schools around Ohio. It's a 4-week program called Girl Be the Goat. It'll give the girls an opportunity to get some college readiness and career readiness training. And so they'll get 4 sessions with me. They'll get a copy of my book, Be the Goat. They'll also get access to an online course that I developed that has 10 modules in it. So I'm going to be, going around to different schools, pitching that so I can get into those schools and work with and talk to those girls. So I'm really excited about what that's going to look like and what that's going to end up and how many girls I'll be able to work with.
Okay. Well, if you'd like to keep up with Dr. Tameka Ellington, just visit her website, drtamekaellington.com, and you will get details on the things that she has coming up, hopefully, and you can stay tuned and stay in touch. Dr. T, thanks for joining me on Open Door.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
All right. And to those of you who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.